All at once, a shadow passed overhead. In a flash of sudden violence, a round, fat grouper swooped down like a dive-bombing eagle and snapped up the hapless prey. "Whoa, sorry, guy. Gotta keep on your fins. It's a jungle out here." Almost as an afterthought, he looked around for Dante, his dive partner. To avoid wearing his glasses underwater, the photographer sported a prescription dive mask that distorted his features into a mountainous nose under saucer-wide, staring eyes. It was a shocked, almost crazed appearance. Kaz chuckled and swallowed water in the process. "Concentrate," he reminded himself with a cough. Dante was obviously very impressed by his surroundings because he was firing off pictures of every shrimp and minnow. 6 minutes into the dive, the photographer was officially out of film. Even through his mask and a cloud of bubbles, English's disgust was plain. Impatiently, he grabbed the two novices each by a wrist and began to swim them toward the reef. Off to the side, they could see the girls moving in the same direction. As the reef loomed up, the detail of the coral formations began to come into spectacular focus. The colors were unbelievable, almost unreal, like the product of some Hollywood special effects department. The shapes were positively extraterrestrial. Huge plumes of lettuce coral, branch spikes of staghorn, mounds of brain coral the size of dump trucks, all stacked upon each other in a mountain that rose to a summit that was perhaps 10 feet below the glittering surface. Kaz checked the gauge on his diver's watch and realized with some surprise that they had descended to 40 feet, which was twice as deep as he'd ever ventured before. Adriana reached out to touch the coral. In a flash, Star's hand shot forward and grabbed her wrist. The experienced diver gestured with a scolding finger. "I knew that," Kaz thought to himself. The reef was a living organism composed of uncounted millions of tiny animals called polyps. Even the slightest touch would kill the outermost layer of creatures, damaging the reef, not to mention that the polyps would sting you. English flashed the hand signal for descent and led them down to 60 feet, to the base of the coral edifice. Kaz adjusted his BC to neutral buoyancy to stop the descent. "I could get good at this," he reflected, pleased to be developing a talent that had nothing to do with skating, shooting, and attempted murder. Here, the coral formations gave way to a variety of sea flora growing out of a firm sandy bottom, the hidden shoals proper. Life was everywhere, although not quite as colorful as higher up on the reef. At this depth, the sun's rays could not fully penetrate the water. It was a land of twilight. Kaz's attention was drawn to a small, hurried movement below. At first, it seemed as if the sand itself was boiling up into little aquatic dust devils. He angled his body so that his face mask was positioned just above the disturbance and took a closer look. All at once, the swirling sand was gone, and a large eye was looking back at him. "Hey!" His cry of shock spit the regulator clear out of his mouth. It was amazing how loud his voice sounded underwater, and not just to himself either, because Dante headed straight for him. A dark, slithering blob exploded out of the seabed, leaving a thick cloud of black ink in its wake. "Octopus!" cried Dante, losing his own regulator in the process. The identification was unnecessary. Kaz could see the 8 undulating arms trailing behind the fleeing body. It was so fluid that the size was hard to guess. Maybe a baby pumpkin at the center of a 2-foot wingspan. English flashed out of nowhere, placed himself in the creature's escape path, and allowed it to come to him. He grabbed it by 2 flailing tentacles. Instantly, the thing turned an angry orange before cloaking itself and the dive guide in a second, much larger emission of ink. Fumbling for his mouthpiece, Kaz lost sight of them, but caught a glimpse of English, much higher up, carrying his prize to the surface. Dante pulled a 5x7 underwater slate out of his BC pocket. With a tethered pencil, he scribbled a quick message on the rigid plastic and showed it to Kaz. It read, "Dinner?" Kaz just shrugged. The dive guide was back almost immediately, but the dark face inside his mask yielded no clue as to the octopus's fate. At that point, the team had been down for half an hour. English directed them to another section of reef, a gradual upward slope where they could be closer to the surface where their air began to run low. It was important to ascend slowly to avoid decompression sickness. If a diver went up too quickly, the sudden lowering of water pressure was like popping the top on a soda can. Nitrogen gas in the bloodstream could fizz up like a Pepsi. It was no joke. The bends could cripple you for life or kill you. As he watched the sunlit surface draw closer and closer, Kaz was growing increasingly comfortable. With every passing minute, technique and mechanics became more automatic, allowing him to enjoy the reef and its many inhabitants. If I keep this up, he thought, I could get to really like scuba. The thought had barely crossed his mind when he saw the silhouette. Alien, yet at the same time familiar. It was approaching from dead ahead. The triangular dorsal fin, the black, emotionless eyes, the pointed snout. Shark.